Okay? So it really angered Nebuchadnezzar, so he goes and gets 3 Hebrew priests, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and he brings them there to Babylon, and he says, I want you to make this work for me. And they said, well, you're not our king, and you've conquered our people, and we're not going to work for you. And he says, well, all right, then I'm just going to throw you in there, and then you're either going to sink or swim. You're going to die, or you're going to get this thing working. Because what was Nebuchadnezzar trying to do? Same thing as Gilgamesh. Contact the ancient gods and learn the secret of immortality. Okay? So he takes Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and but interestingly enough, they don't just take them and throw them in there. First, it says they don their hats, coats, and other garments, put on their radiation suits or whatever, and they went in there, and they're walking around in there. And Nebuchadnezzar, he's leery of the whole deal, so he's standing back to ask his minions, are they in there? Yeah. Are all 3 of them in there? Well, actually, there's 4 of them in there. 4? Who's the 4th one? The Son of God. Where'd this guy come from? Again, an indication that this could have been a portal to somewhere. And if it was the Son of God, I'd like to know what happened to him, because there's never any more mention about that. But after this, whatever happened there, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego come out, and Nebuchadnezzar praised them and made them ranking people there in Babylon and gave them the run of the place, because apparently these representatives of the Hebrew priesthood, knew the secrets, or some of the secrets, of the monoatomic gold. Slide. Now this brings us up into more modern times. We find out that apparently the Nazis were onto this. We all know from the Indiana Jones movie that the Nazis were all after these occult things and the Ark of the Covenant and everything else. Why? Because they were religious? I don't think so. They were after these ancient secrets. They were after the ancient secrets of energy manipulation. And they began to get some of these secrets because they developed the world's first practical jet fighter, the Me-262, the V-2, the V-1, and when they overran Germany in 1945, what's on the drawing boards? Flying saucers, UFOs. They were working on them. And I have good reason to believe they were actually test flying them. In fact, if that war had stretched on maybe even another 6 months, there's no telling what they might have come up with. And who was in charge of all that? A very mysterious SS general by the name of Hans Kammler. He was in charge of all of their leading edge technology. And he's the one that brought Werner von Braun and von Dornberger and the rest of them from Peenemünde and brought all the rocket research down into Munich. Why? I think because they were closer to the American lines and they wanted to give up to the Americans because they knew they'd be well treated and they knew that they could work their way into America, which is what they did through Operation Paperclip. Now, according to von Braun, he wanted to resume testing of the V-2s, and Kammler told him, no, I'm going to hand the V-2s and you folks over to the Americans in exchange for immunity. But a little later, he told von Braun, I'm going to disappear and you're not going to hear from me again. And sure enough, he dropped from sight. And even though there were reports that Kammler was seen in the United States in the 50s and early 60s, there is no record of what happened to him. But we know that he did not turn over the V-2s or the V-1s. Okay? But yet, if he was in the United States and if he did survive the war, what did he hand over to the Allies in exchange for immunity? The secret of anti-gravity, the secret of the white powder gold, the secret of the manipulation of energy, because he was also tied to experimental work that was done at what essentially was a super collider, super collector in western Poland, the ruins of which are still there. Slide. And we have a lot of tantalizing evidence that the Allies did get hold of such technology, because in this article from the early 1950s, the gravity engines are coming, the G engines, meaning gravity. And we have huge, very prominent aviation pioneers like L.D. Bell saying, we're already working on nuclear fuels and equipment to cancel out gravity. And Bill Lear, developer of the Learjet, all matter within the ship would be influenced by the ship's gravitation alone. They were beginning to crack the door open on the secrets of the manipulation of energy at the atomic and subatomic level. But bingo, it all goes dark. It's like it didn't happen. And when they finally rolled out the Avro car, which was a joint saucer development between Britain, America, and Canada in the late 50s. They rolled out this flimsy-looking thing that wobbled around a little bit, and they said, gee, it didn't work. Was this simply a cover for their anti-gravity research? And this leads into the fascinating speculation of, is there a dark, shadow government-run alternative space program? And it even gives me the thought, some of you may be well aware of the controversy over whether or not we actually went to the moon because of the problems in weight and in thrust and in the expansion, expendable of fuel, this expending of fuel, et cetera, radiation, because the Van Allen belt stretches, according to Van Allen, for thousands of miles further than NASA wants to admit, which means they would have been bombarded by intense radiation, which would have been fatal. So how do they get through all of this? And there seems to be a legitimate controversy over that. And yet I have spoken to the astronauts, and I'm still not prepared to say we didn't go to the moon. Perhaps we went to the moon using technology other than what we've been told. And maybe even the astronauts themselves don't know. Perhaps they were put in a rocket, and the rocket was shot into space. And during that period when they're blacking out and not all with it, the anti-gravity kicks in, and they're pulled or pushed through this super technology. Speculation, but it could explain that anomaly. And we also have General Nathan Twining's memo of 23rd of September 1947, where he's talking about UFOs. And he says, the phenomena reported is something real, not visionary or fictitious. They knew at the beginning in 1947 that this was all real. September the 23rd is an interesting time period because this was just 2 months after the crashes in Roswell, New Mexico. It's also the same day that President Truman signed the National Security Act of 1947. This is what's done us in, folks, because we all know that the National Security Act of 1947 created the CIA. We know that it changed the name of the War Department to the Defense Department, a little PR change. But what a lot of people don't realize or haven't really understood is that it also created the National Security Council. Now, we all have heard of the National Security Council because even up to the invasion of Iraq, everything's done through the National Security Council, which by definition takes care of anything having to do with national security. But who can tell me who the National Security Council is?
President, Vice President, Secretary of Defense, and Secretary of State.
4 people. Did y'all hear that? The President, Vice President, Secretaries of State, and Defense. 3 of those are appointed by the President. So it's the President controls the whole, anything having to do with national security. This is where we went into the national security state. This is why, because creating the National Security Council, anything having to do with national security, it bypasses Congress, bypasses the Constitution, bypasses the media, and hence bypasses the public. And this is why they've kept the lid on UFOs. Why? Because they don't want people to know our deepest, darkest secrets, which is they are tampering with the basic building blocks of the universe. Manipulation of energy at the subatomic level. Slide. And by the way, in that same document, Twining says, it is possible within the present U.S. knowledge, provided extensive detailed development is undertaken, to construct a piloted aircraft which has the general description of the object in subparagraph A, meaning a UFO. So in 1947, they were basically saying if we had a crash policy, we could build our own UFOs. And I think they've done it. And that's why but don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that every UFO sighting is some sort of secret government test craft. A bunch of them are, but not all of them. In fact, there is good evidence to suggest that we are in an undeclared, under-the-table, covert war with extraterrestrials. And we're not being told about it. And it kind of makes a mockery of freedom and democracy, doesn't it? And here's the Avro saucer, and they're all going, well, gee, it just didn't work. And that was the end of that. And this has never been talked about. In fact, to this very day, some of you probably understand what I'm saying. If you go to our centers of higher learning, or if you go to the large corporations and you start talking about anti-gravity, they